Video, we're going to talk about how to set up our workspace, how to properly start a painting, and then we're going to paint the first three boxes into our sketchbook together so that we know what to do. So you should have in your sketchbook taken this 1x4 template and traced 3 times. Then you can turn it sideways and you can add the individual lines that divide the boxes up into 4. From here, let's go ahead and label it, because these are going to be us playing around with paint and trying to mix the different secondaries and the different kinds of secondaries that you can get. So a secondary is a mix of 2 primary colors. And when you mix 2 primary colors together, you can get orange, green, and violet or purple. We're going to take this a step further, and we're going to focus on warm tones and cool tones of each, because you're going to get vastly different colors based on what you mix, which is why I have 2 different sets of each of the primaries. And so what we're going to do is, for orange, we know red and yellow make orange. So we're going to do red warm plus yellow warm. Then we're going to focus on red cool plus yellow cool, excuse me. That's why I do things in pencil. Yellow cool. And here's where I start to get confused. I want to do red warm and yellow cool. So RW plus yellow C. And then red cool plus yellow warm. And if you're sitting here going, oh my gosh, there's no way I'm going to remember this, it's okay. You will remember it, because we're going to label it on our paint as well. So you don't have to sit there and try to remember, is alizarin crimson warm or cool? It's going to be labeled for you. So for green, we're looking at blue and yellow. So we start off with, and I wrote red, we start off with warm and warm. So warm plus warm. So if you want to do this, blue and yellow. Then we go to cool plus cool, blue and yellow. And then warm plus cool, and cool plus warm. Blue and yellow, blue and yellow. And neaten that up as well. Then for violet, it's blue and red. So we do our warm and warm, cool plus cool, warm plus cool, cool plus warm. And so this is going to be red and blue. All right, so let's come over to our palette. I've already set it up to save time, but you're going to have 2 of each color. You're going to have a primary yellow and a cadmium yellow light, and those are going to serve as our warm and cool. And you can see I've labeled them W or C for warm or cool. So the primary yellow is warm, cadmium yellow is cool. So for the blues, which I recognize on the screen here, it does not come up as very different, but they are drastically different inside of here, and you'll see them as different inside of your palette as well. Cerulean blue is going to be our warm blue, and our ultramarine blue is going to be our cool blue. And then over to reds, we have our alizarin crimson. That is going to be our cool red. And our cadmium red medium is going to be our warm red. You'll see I don't have any white on my palette just yet. It's because we don't need them for this one. We're just going to be mixing primary colors together. We're not making any tints today. I want to talk about the brush as well. We're going to be exclusively using a flat brush starting off, and that's going to make it easier. One, because the squares are going to have straight edges, and we want to have a straight edge brush as well, but it also helps with some of the control. You're going to be practicing getting crisp edges and nice smooth paint inside of the interior here, and a flat brush is just going to really help you with that. So we start off with here, and the first thing I want to talk to you about is loading your brush. If you've ever had to paint before and you did not preload your brush, you might have found that it was kind of frustrating to get started. You get some paint on your brush, you go to paint, it's dry. It's immediately got to get some more paint. And that is because the bristles themselves are kind of hollow on the inside. And so they want to absorb moisture. Like that is their job. And until they are saturated, they're just going to keep soaking up and soaking up the paint that you need to be putting on the canvas. So in order to not waste paint and to make it to where we can clean these brushes out a lot easier at the end, we're going to preload our brush. Now this one has already been used today, so it's not going to be as dramatic of a difference, but I'm going to just come in here and I'm just going to dip the edge of my brush in. I'm not going to dunk it. And I'm going to let it soak up some of that water. Then I'm going to scrape off the excess. I don't want it to be just sopping wet. I do want it to just be preloaded and ready to go so I can grab paint. I keep a towel next to me as well. And sometimes I'll even dab it on the towel. You can see this towel's been through it. Okay, so we've preloaded our brush. We've got our paint on the paint tray here, and we've labeled our first 3 boxes. So we're going to get started just mixing colors straightforward here. So we're going to start with a warm red and a warm yellow. And so that tells me we're going to start with primary yellow and the cadmium red. You can see I call it cad red just to cut down. The temptation here is to overdo it on the red. Ideally, we have a 50-50 split, 50% red, 50% yellow. But I know that this red is going to overpower any yellow that I put in here. So I'm going to go kind of light on the red. And it might be more like 60-40, like 60% yellow, 40% red. And then coming in for my warm yellow. You can see I'm not mixing a whole lot. We're dealing with very tiny squares over here, so it's not going to take a whole lot to mix it together. So with a perfect 50-50 split, this still looks very red to me. And I want an orange. I don't want a red orange. So I am going to go back in. I'm going to clean my brush off a little bit. And I want to grab some more yellow. Oh, let's pause real quick. And we're back. I just had a brief interruption. But what I did was I just added a little more yellow and I just mixed it all together until it looked pretty orange. Now, my screen is making things a little darker, so if you're like, it still looks pretty red, you're going to have to trust a little bit that it is actually orange. And it's just the screen right here. So I am going to try to scrape off a lot of what's on my brush and then kind of re-grab it so that it's right at the edge of my brush. You never want your paint going up into the ferrule. And then I'm just going to paint this neatly into the box here. I'm just going to let the brush do all the work. I'm not going to try to force it. And voila. This looks pretty good. I don't see any white underneath, so I don't know if I'll need a second coat. If you see that it looks transparent, like you can still see through it, you might need a second coat. But if you look at your rubric, clean edges is on there. You can even see my edges are not perfect, but clean edges is a big factor, as well as smooth application of paint. So if you're seeing lumps and bumps, then you need to smooth those out. Okay, so let's move on to the cools. I'll take my cool yellow, and I'm going to take my cool red, the alizarin, and I'm just going to mix those together. I'm going to try not to do as much as I did earlier. But I had a long interruption, so I had to redo my paint. So I actually need a little bit more red here. So So these two cools together are going to create a very different feeling orange. It's going to be more of like a rust orange. Like, think Texas Longhorns kind of orange. All right. And again, it's so unfortunate you can't see the actual color difference here. And see if I can't get a little closer if that helps. Get in some different light. But it is a different orange. And you'll notice with yours too that if you're not adding too much red, you actually are getting a good mix of the yellow and the red, that it will be a different color. But this is just not showing up. Okay, so my next one is the warm red. So that's my cadmium red. I'm going to put that down. That was way too much. And then my primary yellow. I have to probably get a good chunk of that. And then mix that together. And you know what? I said it right out loud, but I am not painting the correct one. The alizarin crimson is a cool red, and the primary yellow is a warm yellow. So I'm actually doing this last box here. So cool red, warm yellow. Again, it is very easy to get confused, but fortunately we caught it before I painted the wrong spot. And had I painted the wrong spot, I would have just waited for it to dry and then painted over it with the correct one. But fortunately I did not have to do that because that does take some time. Boom. But it looks great. Then we go into the actual warm red, which is this cad red. I'm going to get a lot less of that. I'm going to put it over here. This is drying, so I can just put stuff on top of dry paint. It's not going to remix in. It's not going to be a big deal. So now I go into the cad yellow, because that's my cool yellow here. And it is also drying up, because I did not get as much of that. So I'm going to mix those together. Okay. I'm going to scrape off the excess, reload my brush, and then paint that in here. So again, this looks much better in person. I'm going to try to get it in a different light here. They do look different. Down here, they don't look so different, but they are. You do the same thing for the green and the violet. So green is blue and yellow. So you switch between warms, cools, warm and cool. Hopefully you don't get confused. Violet is red and blue. And I'll show you what those look like done. Okay, so here it is done. Again, it's really hard to tell the color difference on a lot of these. The greens are a little easier to tell. The purples are very dark. There is a drastic difference between them, and you're just going to have to trust me on that because you're not going to see it on camera. If I was to mix these with white, which I was almost tempted to do just for explanation purposes, it would look more like a purple that you would expect to be putting into your artwork. But these are very nice tones. They look great, honestly, in person, but they're just not showing up on camera. But I hope this helps get you set up on those first three ones. Next up, we're going to be doing the values, the larger value scales at the bottom.